and Prace Days 2019. We have a very interesting opening session, first two introductions, then half an hour talk on Prace, and then two keynotes on EuroHPC and on Joint. So first, a welcome from Prace by Prace Managing Director Serge Bogarts. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. Janne, is this microphone working? Hello, do you hear me? Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, one very warm welcome to you to this EuroHPC Summit Week. This is really the sign of the change of our HPC ecosystem with the advent of the EuroHPC Joint Undertaking. This conference has been organized by Prace and ETP4HPC in the framework of the EXDCI and the Prace IP project, under the lead of an organization and a program committee that I've had the privilege to chair, and I would like to already to thank all the members of this OPC for having put together this very interesting program of the week. The program has been organized around the three pillars of the ecosystem: the infrastructure pillar, the application pillar, and the technology development pillar. And you will see the detail of the of this in the conference program. So I invite you to refer to this sheet that you have in your bag, but also to take the chance to have a look at the online schedule, or at even better on the conference app. You have at the back the reference to these conference application. A very quick overview of the program of the week. The program is structured with keynotes in the morning and parallel sessions in the afternoon. Concerning the keynotes, Janne already talked about this very interesting opening session today. I would like to highlight some other keynotes of the week, with the presentation of the scientific case later this morning by Nuria Lopez and Sinead Ryan. I'd like also to invite you tomorrow to attend the international session of the BDEC, sharing the big data and extreme scale computing work that they are doing at the international level. Also the talk of the Ada Lovelace Award tomorrow. And we, as Prace, also are very much supporting the user forum session tomorrow, who has been working on a survey to the users and collecting feedback to see how they experience their usage of the infrastructure. And finally, on Thursday, we will have a keynote by Vadim Montelier in memory of Dimitri Komatic, who passed away in January, was member of the SSE, and we are very proud to be able to honor his memory at the occasion of this keynote. And we will, in a way, end the plenary session with a panel on the future of scientific and industrial computing in Europe, and finally with the award ceremony, the Prace Award ceremony on Thursday. The afternoon sessions are extremely rich, and again, I would invite you to go to the conference program, in particular to the app, to have a look at the best parallel session for given your interest. And I'd like still maybe to point some of these, the EuroHPC Bird of a Feather, or the co-design session, or the HPC Ecosystem Summit, or the HPC Ecosystem Workshop, that might be of interest for you. For your information, we're also running for the second time hands-on training in parallel to the conference. These sessions are actually happening in PSNC premises for students to really get hands-on practice of HPC for the second time with this session. I already like to conclude in thanking PSNC for hosting this event in Poznan this year, and with the very wonderful staff they have provided to actually get this conference a real success. and I would like to wish you all a very successful and pleasant conference this week in Poznan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Serge. Two practical announcements. Right after this opening session, we have a group photo, 10:15, 10:15, and it will take place inside in the stairs between this floor and the ground floor. The other announcement is that, as also marked in the program, at 7 p.m. at 19:00, we have the poster and reception here in the foyer in the lobby. So, next, our very esteemed local host from Poznan Supercomputing and Networking Center, Norbert Meyer. Please, Norbert.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's our pleasure to host you in Poznan. The event is co-organized by PSNC, Poznan Supercomputing Networking Center. And let me, as a starting point, introduce and give some short information about the city, about Poland and PSNC itself. So, about Poznan, it's a very historical city. We are talking about. Can you hear me? Or is it? No. Okay. It's a very old city, 1,000 years. Some of us are talking about the first Polish capital in Poznan. The second one was Gniezno. Of course, that's historically. The official one is in Gniezno. It's a capital of a region called Great Poland, Wielkopolska. So place of history, very interesting sites in Poznan, but we meet also the modernity. Yeah? So it's a new city with art, city of art. We have also several examples of high tech, starting from automotive up to Internet of Things. Finally, I think you will have the chance to taste also our I would say regional cuisine. It will happen on Wednesday. The most important and the most famous I think are the potatoes with cheese. It's called in Polish or in I would say in the regional language, Prace. But the most important, I think, for Poznan, or one of the most important, is Poznan is an academic city with 120,000 students, what makes about 20% of the Poznan population. So you can see it's really an academic city. We have 8 public universities in Poznan and several public universities, and that's the communities where PSNC started to deliver the infrastructure and started to deliver the services. It was last year we celebrated 25 years, so it was 25 years ago. Nowadays, our I would say main quarter is the Polish Optical Internet Research Center. Probably you know PSNC from the HPC area, but it's not only HPC. We have I would say 2 pillars. One of them is to ensure the scientific community access to the and deliver the access to IT infrastructure. And the second pillar is the research and development. So we started with the first pillar, means to deliver first of all the networking to universities and R&D institutions. Later on, and to deliver services. 25 years ago, it was HPC. We started with a Cray machine. Later on, it evolved into, I would say, distributed computing, into cloud computing, grid, but HPC is still an important part of our service. And later on, we started also to research and develop around the infrastructure. So, from the formal point of view, PSNC is an institute of Academy of Sciences affiliated to the Institute of Bioorganic Chemistry. As mentioned 3 years ago, we built thanks to the structural funds, the Polish Optical Internet Research Center. The workshops on Wednesday and Thursday will be organized on PSNC premises, exactly in this building. Activities. So, variety of activities in PSNC, HPC, but also cybersec, Industry 4.0, personalized medicine, networking, of course, education, culture. Yeah, and how it looks like in Poland. Yeah, so I think we are very proud. Because of a consortium which was created 20 years ago, consortium of Polish universities and institutions which were called city metropolitan area. We have 22 such 23 partners which created the consortium, and later on the consortium started to build a national network. At this moment, we have an academic fiber optic network with several services, a network which delivers about 6,000 kilometers around Poland. But a network which is also owning some fibers in Europe. So we have more than 2,500 kilometers of fibers in Europe, connecting major hubs to, Poland is connected to major hubs in Europe, for example, to the of course, JANT network, but also to GLIF, to the worldwide network. And we are also connected to major research infrastructures. For example, to CERN. Thanks to Prace, we are included in a virtual network of this of the Prace infrastructure. And this allows us to really to dedicate and build high bandwidth, high throughput services in Poland, and also for European purposes and European projects. Coming back to HPC, 6 computing centers in Poland, 5 of them, I would say, general purpose, like PSNC, and one of the 6th computing center is dedicated for high energy physics, and gives the calculations to CERN, but delivers also the security for energy physics and plans. Last year, we started a national project. We called it Prace Lab. Prace Lab because it's related to the Prace infrastructure in Europe, and it gives a distributed, will give, in fact, because it started in January, will deliver an HPC infrastructure in 5 computing centers, integrated with the data infrastructure. So it's geographically distributed, federated consortium oriented to science and industry. So part of the infrastructure is dedicated for commercial purposes. That was the demand coming from the call. 40% exactly for commercial purposes, 60% for science and research. Poland gives also the opportunity to support the national infrastructures, national communities, and gives the chance to connect the infrastructure to European research infrastructures, namely to S3. We have a roadmap, a Polish roadmap with 50 proposals. 20 of them are connected, related with the European initiative S3 projects. Yeah, and that's briefly the I would say current state in Poland. Of course, in a nutshell, I would like to wish you a fruitful discussion in the coming 2-3 days, and of course a nice day in Poland. The weather in Poland and Poznań. The weather is not, I would say, very good, but I hope at least the discussions will be more fruitful and during the HPC Summit week. But we are still working. Yeah, probably next tomorrow it will be better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norbert. Next we have a presentation by Thomas Lippert, Prace in service to HPC. Thomas is chair of Prace Council and is the director of ULI Supercomputing Center. Thomas, please go ahead. Max 30 minutes, including the questions.
Thank you very much, Jan. So I would like to give you the welcome of the Prace Council. Thanks for coming, and I'm very happy to see such a large audience. You see our, let's say, motto, our, let's say, mission. We are in service of HPC. Actually, we would like to be, but obviously the picture vanished. So can you solve the problem? Just vanished. It's coming back. Okay. So Prace is coming back, you see. We are in service of HPC, and what does it mean actually? Let me give you an overview. What is all those tasks that Prace has built up during the last 10 years? And let's start with the fact that we provide open access to leadership class type of HPC systems for researchers from science, engineering, and industry in Europe. This is done on a peer review that is probably worldwide of the highest standard. That's very important asset of Prace, that the peer review that we conduct finally to have an objective criteria to access the cycles, expensive cycles, these machines, is led by the science people that have highest quality standards applied and are themselves representatives of the foremost scientists in Europe. We have built up our operation of the diversity of systems, and this goes also to all of satellites based on a unified set of services. So a user is not just, if a user goes from one machine to the other one, this is not a new situation, completely new situation. The user can rely on standards that the user might have already known from a previous system. At the same time, we guarantee an architectural variety to meet all sorts of algorithmic needs. That's also important. Not all algorithms run in all of those systems in the same manner. But implementing support that's already in those centers by those teams having a unified view from a European perspective. We provide preparatory access and we support, for instance, COEs and all other type of organizations concerning HPC. So the industrial support is a primary activity when we conduct the Prace projects. The training through so-called Prace training centers, very successful training activities, seasonal schools, summer of HPC, MOOCs, there is many more. This is all coordinated, so there is no fragmentation. And but one should emphasize the word fragmentation has vanished from European HPC. Why was it fragmented? If it was a national issue, from outside it was a European issue. Now it has become European. Now, let me go on. Who is doing it? You should clearly know that this is a community effort. So there are many sites and many organizations that are contributing to the success of all of this. And actually, those are the people who are servicing HPC. Yeah? This is the way we can say we are in service to HPC. I'm sure I have forgotten some of you, and please accept my apologies for that, but it's quite an impressive list of contributors. Now, concerning the machines that deliver the cycles so far, and will deliver the cycles also in the future, so we face, of course, new machines, the EuroHPC, which will boost the whole, let's say, available compute time by factors in the future. And again, we have a failure. So, these machines are located at 5 countries. So this is France, this is Switzerland, this is Spain, this is Germany, and of course the fifth one, I have to find out that I don't forget one, Italy. Yeah? So you see Italy. So we have 5 hosting members that contribute to Prace and have contributed, and in the future we hope that through the European machines, as I said, we will boost what is available. And you can see it's a lot that's available. With 110 petablocks, and we know this, that we can boost it by at least 300 and more petablocks. And if we count an increase that will come here as well, we might go up to another exabyte accumulated with performance end of 2014. Now, this is not the whole story. There are many more sites. We are just preparing. This is not yet published, so maybe there are a little bit shifts in locations here still. This will be an interactive map of the tier 1. I think also the tier 2 centers will be included in the future. In Europe, all of the compute centers, you see, it's a coverage that speaks for itself. It means we have a pan-European HPC infrastructure. Some of the countries still, of course, have to catch up. But as you can see, there is a lot, and some are not completely listed yet. As I said, it's a preliminary one, but it will soon be published, so you can give yourself also an overview. And on this side, you see the 26 countries that are contributing to what we do. Now, this finally will realize a vision that has been formulated in 2007 already, when we started the whole Prace idea to conceptualize it. And later it became, of course, a member of the S3 list. And what we want to achieve, of course, is a complete coverage of all levels. Oh, it becomes very loud now. Of all levels. I can also speak louder if you want. Okay. Of all levels, regional levels, national and European level, and my favorite way to distinguish between those different levels is to say, okay, here the peer review is done on a European basis. Here's a peer review is done on national, let's say, regions. And here we have regional one. What this means is, and one should be very clear about it, on the highest level, of course, the competition is also the most severe one, and the quality criteria, of course, speak for themselves. So one can be proud to have a Prace project being granted. Now, just to give you, I think we have a distortion. Don't we have a distortion? You are working on it, okay. Not only acoustic. Coming back. The Prace milestones. If you think back, those of us in my age, they know there was DISA very early. The discussion started in 2002. Then it was realized in the first project. I remember 2004 starting, maybe 2003, not fully. But the first ideas of Prace or European machines itself came up in 2003. Maybe people remember Bill Jack Layton from the UK. And then there was a Europe task force head led by Timo Koski in 2006, which finally produced or published the white papers that have been created. Then we came to the roadmap of ESFRI and made an MOU. In 2010 there was a signature, and this was a phase 1 of Prace, and phase 2 started in 2016, still ongoing, will probably be prolonged for 1 year, and then Prace 3, and let's say the joint activities that of course will include cooperation with EuroHPC should start. From the point of view of building up the infrastructure, we have so-called implementation projects, and you see a very impressive row of such projects, starting with a preparatory one, and of course today we are here. We have just entered the 6th IP project, the 6th implementation project of Prace. Without that, I think one can safely say Prace would not exist as it existing. And of course, nothing goes without money. There is about 100 million euro funding going into this, granted by the EU. One can congratulate us and the members on the one hand for the achievement, but one has also to be very thankful for this type of support that finally made, and this was the other pillar, made HPC a European issue. Now, altogether 688 scientific projects enabled. I said already 110 petaflops, more than 20 billion core hours. Interestingly, those PIs are to two-thirds not coming from the countries where the machines are operated. This means it's European. That's what Prace is. More than 50 companies supported, and more than 12,000 people, students, young researchers trained through Prace. Let me give you some highlights. It goes like a movie. It's a little bit fast, but it gives you an impressive account what has been achieved. It's not exhaustive, it's just some examples. You can multiply those examples by a factor of 10, and this would not be sufficient to give you highlights of Prace. So let me just give one for each of those machines. So you know how that gravitational waves have been found. But you also might know that signals to be identified need excessive simulation, so that you find those signals best fitting to the models that you get from general relativity. Such things have been computed on the Barcelona machines, and this I would call, we provide models for Nobel Prizes type of research. That's a very true statement. I guess most of simulations have been done there. Now, this machine is a machine in, I hope it will come back, is a machine in Barcelona, and very famous, you know. The next type of research has been done on chemical machine, and that's more for those solid state physicists, and this is also a fascinating thing for me, that one can find theoretically, one can find, let's say, type of dynamics, here instability of the so-called zero gap. It's abstract, but this is something one needs to know, otherwise you will not be able to find it experimentally. So this has to do with insulator physics, an old idea by a famous theoretician, realized on a Chineke machine with connection to Center of Excellence. This is Marconi. Okay, I show those machines as they have been used when the research has been done. Some of the sites, meanwhile, have more new machines, but of course we have to give the honor to the machines where the computing has been done. Climate simulations. A world record in code acceleration done by the CSCS, coming down to kilometer scale resolution. This is something that's 3 times faster than we have it on the Taihu Light machine at this time. This was the #1 at this time. So just by algorithmic research and by those virtues that we have in Europe, that we have probably the best research landscape in the world in this respect. Maybe we are not the best in the machines. Accumulated, we might be #3 in the world at this time, but from the research point of view, maybe we are #1. It's difficult to measure, it's my impression. Now, this has been done on P-Steint. Then there is a very practical example, the biggest crash optimization ever, which has been performed on the Genzi or Chanzy, I prefer to say, machine in France for Renault. And what you see, this is something where without such optimization, one would not be able to, let's say, go into such type of resolution with 20 million degrees of freedom. So that's Curie. A very practical example comes from the Stuttgart machine, from the HLRS. So you see multi-layered welding lines, automatic welding. Of course, this is an important issue, that all of this does go without holes and is stable. This is a multi-layered welding line. It's a close collaboration with LS Dyna. And this is something typically where SMEs can profit from. Done on Hazel Hen in 2015. A more, let's say, fundamental example, solving an 80-year-old riddle, namely understanding the mass difference in proton of neutron. It's insofar fundamental that one would know it experimentally, but not theoretically. It was not known. It was done on the Ukraine machine in Jülich. This is something, somewhat a result for textbooks. It will stay with us. This has been computed. That's a number, goes into the textbooks. That's for mankind's culture, scientific culture of the future, finally to realize Goethe's, let's say, desire to understand, or Faust's desire to understand what binds the world's inner things together, done on the Ukraine machine. Now a very recent one, black hole simulations. You know there is this famous picture. How do you do those pictures? With like gravitational waves, you have to model the picture according to the theoretical model that you only can simulate with magneto-hydrodynamics methods. And this was a very heavy task of more than 60K simulation models, each of those very heavy. And it's essential that one can get rid of the background, or that one can iterate into the right model of this. So you see also here, and of course we are a little bit more modest than the Americans. They claim all those things for themselves, but that was done on one of the machines contributing to Prace, namely the LRZ machine in Munich. And so you see we also enable breakthrough observations. Now, that's a machine. At this time, it's meanwhile much bigger, because they have upgraded the system to the SuperMOOC next generation. Now, what is the future? Prace is in the lucky situation to have a scientific steering committee. This group is giving it the necessary and essential input to adapt to new developments, to go the right ways in training, etc. And one of the very important recommendations of the scientific case performed in 2018 is future infrastructures and operations will need to be much more diverse to support HPC, data science, and different types of accelerators. But we also need to avoid fragmentation. So we are in between both, let's say, requirements. No fragmentation, otherwise we get no coherency in applying our methods. On the other hand, we have to observe different technologies to become the important vehicles to do the simulations, including, for instance, the infamous keyword AI. But I think I have the belief that the future HPC systems done in a proper manner are also the future AI systems. Now, the scientific case has highlighted that scientific applications demand by factor small compute cycles. Augmented memory bandwidth, that's very important. The memory bandwidth it gives you immediately a factor. If you have a faster machine, that's one thing, but if you can also increase the memory bandwidth per processor, you get immediately higher effectiveness of this machine. New methods grow exponentially. We have scaling by ensembles, we have deep learning, new statistical models, all of this has to be included. And so this is to be found in detail if you look into the scientific case. Software and algorithms, Prace and Europe need most ambitious strategy to develop the software part of next generation computing. Okay, you can add in order to stay #1 in science and in engineering applications of HPC. Now, what does all this mean in relation to these wonderful developments? We are talking about the EuroHPC, sitting here in the EuroHPC Summit. It means that let's bring the virtues together. The EuroHPC is in some sense a culmination of the understanding and the efforts that HPC plays such an important role and has to be something that's established really from top down on the European level in order to compete and in order to be leading. Prace has developed from bottom up, also understands it partly as a bottom up activity. If you look at the science, that's very important. Otherwise, it would not have the influence, the very positive influence of the science on Prace. Bring it together. And in order to bring this together, we have started out with a position paper. This you can find on the Prace website, where we have presented a status analysis and impact analysis and sketched how to go into the EuroHPC era as a proposal, creating synergies, evolution of services. It's not static. Even if you have good services, this is not something that we have to stop now. So just now to mention it, I already have named deep learning and all this, but in a more general sense, it's data science on an exascale level, and heading for a partnership. So that's the link. You can find our thoughts on it, and we are going into consultations together. So we already had a very good meeting. I heard of the SSC with the infra group of EuroHPC yesterday. That's exactly what should happen. So this has to be continued, of course. We have planned high-level meeting of EuroHPC and Prace in June to start then getting groups that really bring things together from a formation of working groups with such topics: success, training, applications, funding, and future services. So I think having this conference together is even the real starting point of this. I'm thanking and but we should not forget, as was clear, I'm not sure if I should welcome you because you are co-organizer, but I'm very proud that within this session we are the director of the Digital Excellence and Infrastructure Service Group of the EU, Dr. Thomas Corders. Yesterday you all had also these meetings with Dr. Kalbe. Thanks for being with us and thanks for supporting all of this. With this I'm at the end and I thank for your attention.
Thank you, Thomas. We have time for a couple of questions. If any questions to Thomas, so the microphone will be delivered to you.
There was one question. Was that one? I'm not sure.
Please raise your hand if you have a question.
If there is no question, I'm very happy because then it was very clear what I said. So.
That seems to be the case. Let's thank Thomas again.
Thank you very much.
Next we have keynote speak by Thomas Corders, who besides being director of the directorate that Thomas Lippert mentioned, is a driving force for EuroHPC and the European Commission. So half an hour including the questions, please.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Dzień dobry for our colleagues who are from Poland. It's a particular pleasure to be here with you today and to speak about EuroHPC. First of all, great thanks to all the organizers, since now we are all together under this new, I would say, endeavor, which is called EuroHPC. So many thanks to all of you, because it was it's a bit of boycottage. Anyway, so many thanks to all of you, because it would not have been happening otherwise without your full support, without the support from all of you, I can confess. It maybe was a bit long, although it was done at a breathtaking pace, I can tell you. And many, many thanks to all the member states, to your delegates. But if we have it today, it's because you made it happen. So we were in a situation 2 years ago to start with 7 member states, and today we are 28, plus of course the European Commission, the European Union. And if we are at that stage, it is because all of you and all of the member states believe that there is a huge added value, both from a national perspective and from a European perspective, to make it happen. 28 means that today we have basically all the member states, 25 with the exception of Cyprus, Malta and the United Kingdom. And we have in addition Norway, Switzerland and Turkey with us since now 3 or 4 weeks, if I remember well. And by the way, I take this opportunity to really thank all my colleagues, in particular Gustav Kalbe and his team, who have spent days and nights to make it happen at the pace that you cannot imagine. We're at such a pace sometimes that even member states, when we meet them, and now we are at the 6th meeting we just held 2-3 days ago, they are telling us, please calm down, because we are not able anymore to follow your pace. So you can say yourself, well, okay, fine, we had a European strategy. It was established since 2012. So what is the EuroHPC bringing on top of that? Already Thomas Lippert has highlighted a number of elements there of this European strategy, but I would like to mention that there are 2-3 fundamental differences with what we had in the past. And these fundamental differences are, first of all, that we put in place for the first time in Europe a joint procurement process. So what we want is to get the top machines for you, for the applications that you are running. And the second big objective is to continue all the efforts we did in the sense of building a thriving ecosystem, an HPC and big data ecosystem. You can tell me why it's good to have it. First of all, because our objective is to strengthen the supply industry in Europe. Second, to be able to continue leading the applications in the way Thomas Lippert was mentioning, because we are indeed, everywhere we go around, everybody is telling us that we are leading in the applications, and there were some nice examples already. And third, equally important, is to make sure that we close the chain, we close the link between research on the one side and procurement on the other side. So this is why it is all important. So I would say then, we set it up. So we started in March 2007 with 7 countries, as you heard. In 8 months, we managed to have the regulation out there, that is end of 2018. And then in another 8 months, we negotiate with the Council to be able to have it ready in October. And now we are, as I said, at the 6th meeting. So what happened during these 6 meetings? So let's say, first of all, from an infrastructure perspective, we promised that we will go for what we would call pre-exascale machines, that are machines at the level of more than 100 petaflop per second, and that according to the budget that we have, which is of the order for the next 2 years of €1 billion for both the ecosystem and the infrastructure, that we will devote part of that budget for acquiring those machines. As I said, pre-exascale, a little bit more than 100, possibly more than 150 petaflops, with the European contribution coming on top of the national contribution. That is, if everything goes well, half of the budget would be provided by us and half of the budget by the member states. And at the same time, we wanted to strengthen the machines that many member states would like to have at the level of 2 to 100 petaflops per second. This is the petascale machines, where the European contribution would be of the order of 35%, maximum up to 35% of the acquisition costs. And I'm really proud to say now that we received, first of all, on the pre-exascale part, 3 applications that go for more than 660 million euros, and they are involving 14 countries. So I guess you know already who the contenders are. So Barcelona, Cineca in Bologna, and CSC in Finland, in Kajaani. So that's really something which is fantastic. Nobody was expecting that to happen. And this is really showing that the first step, that of providing or of putting in place an infrastructure for all of you to be able to meet your, I would say, challenging applications, is somehow already there. Now we'll take the decision, since we are still in the evaluation stage, beginning of June, and I do hope that from these 3 applications, as well as the 5 applications we received on the petascale machines, we'll have many of those, if not all of those, running and operational in the next few months, so as to be able to increase exactly what Thomas Lippert was saying, from the 110 petaflops per second, or peta that we have today in terms of compound computing power, to something like 4 times or 5 times bigger. And to be able, for the first time almost, to be able to give you the computing power you need for your applications. So as to stop this phenomenon where most of you go outside Europe because Prace machines are not enough, and you go elsewhere to run your applications. So this is what is at stake, and this is where we are all proud of this first step, and we'll be even more proud when we'll have the results in just 2-3 weeks from now. Now, what would be the next steps? Okay, you say we will select those machines early June, then we do what? So our planning is to then open first of all a phase where other member states can come in this consortia. We'll give a 1-month delay for them to come in, possibly to provide further funding for those machines. And all the funding they provide is against access time. And then we'll sit all together and we will start preparing the next steps. What are those? The next steps is, of course, the procurement process per se, which is going to be a joint procurement process as far as the pre-exascale machines are concerned, with the ambition to be able to install those machines by the end of 2020 and have them operational as of 1st January 2021 at the latest. Something similar will happen on the petascale part. So there, hopefully, we should go a little bit faster. And in principle, we should be ready to have those machines installed middle 2020 and make them available to all of you so that you can run your applications. So when we talk about applications, then the next question is, how do I get access to those machines? Well, already you have access to tier 0 machines via Prace, so the ambition would be to continue providing these kinds of access to those machines. But some of the principles for access have already been defined by the member states and the union in our discussions. So first of all, the applications will be only in the civil domain. So this is in line with the civil character of Horizon 2020, where most of the money is coming from. Second, as we hope that the allocation of time will go smoothly, as smoothly it goes for Prace today, that will have competitive calls. There will be continuous possibility for submission, and then the allocation of access time based on your proposals will continue like this until we see how things are running, and possibly then later on we define another access possibility, which might be simpler than this one, which would be based still on competitive calls for the time being. And what we have also agreed with the member states is that you will not pay for access to those machines. It's the union and the member states paying for those. And at the same time that we could open part, at least, of the JU time that will be accessible from a union perspective to our industrial players for commercial purposes. And we agreed that up to 20% of the JU time could be open for commercial purposes, but only on a pay-per-use I would say, model, by taking for granted that the quality of service that will be provided to all of you will be exactly the same. So I would say these are the fundamental principles for the time being for the access here. And of course, we would be looking at you, would be looking at the possibility of giving us further ideas of how we could make this access the easiest possible for you. Now, this is for the infrastructure part. And this is what we intend to do in the next 2 years with the funding that we got under the present financial framework, which is, as you know, finishing in end of 2020. Let me come to the ecosystem part now. I told you that our purpose is to strengthen what we already have out there from all perspectives, from the supply chain, from the application side, and from the training and skills side. So in 2018, we already, just to take the latest year where we are, what we did last year, in 2018, we had already many calls that are addressing some of this ecosystem. In hardware, we started the European Processor Initiative, first time in Europe where we have the ambition to build a processor which is based on as much as possible European technology. So 23 players coming together. They started in December with the ambition to have in the next 3-4 years the first general purpose processor, and which will be complemented by an accelerator which would be based on OpenRISC-V. This would be the one that we will be using, these developments, to be able to build the first exascale machine based on European technology, and I will come back to that in a moment. But it's not only about hardware. It's a lot about software codes for the scientific communities, and it's a lot about applications for our industrial colleagues. So what we did is already in 2018, we continued some of the centers of excellence, and many of you are belonging to many of the centers of excellence. So 6 are continuing and 3 new have been started for an overall value of 72 million euros. Here we're trying to serve as many scientific communities as possible for providing, an upgrade of your software codes, for optimizing your codes, for developing new computational models. So we tried to have at least these 9 centers of excellence that are there, that are addressing a very big, I would say, or a large scope of what is possible in terms of scientific applications, from weather modeling, from material science, and from engineering aspects to biomedical engineering or to developing or understanding the climate change. So, and of course, we will not stop here, as you will see in a moment. And from an application perspective, we have put in place calls last year for almost 100 million euros so that industry can now build on the experience and capitalize on many of the software developments that are happening in the different scientific communities and use and to build software environments and application test beds in key application areas for Europe. So here we have applications that are addressing many different perspectives. I would say from applications that are dealing with farming. You know that farming is one of the next big challenges from a European perspective, where digital is somehow also shaping the way the future of agriculture will happen, to issues that are related to personal medicine and others. And we will announce in a few days, by the way, the inclusion of 7 new projects that are come from a Connecting Europe facility program, where we have been addressing applications mainly for the public sector. So now, if you are telling me what's next, all this is fine. So we have developed this. So basically in 2018, we had calls for almost 250 million euros. So the calls that I've mentioned, some of those are the ones that I just mentioned. And what's coming up is now under a different perspective, under the joint undertaking, is a research and innovation agenda that you have been preparing in ETP4HPC, but also many of the scientific communities, and where we would have calls in 2019 and 2020 for something like 360 million euros, if it is not more, from the JU, and some additional calls that would come to strengthen our centers of excellence under Horizon 2020, where we hope to have 3 or 4 new centers of excellence with a budget of 20 million euro that we foresee in 2020. So 2019, we hope that the calls will go out there just before summer or just after summer. I do hope that it's going to be before summer. Now we are discussing with the member states the work plan for 2019. You can see what would be the main areas of activity in 2019. So basically we'll have calls that will be addressing only the software and the applications part. We'll have calls that would be allowing you to develop new programming models, new algorithms, new software that will be tailored to application needs. We will provide the opportunity for our software vendors to be able to upgrade their codes and offer the latest possible codes that are commensurate to the application needs. We will start developing an ecosystem that will build around competence centers. This is a new activity that we have all been planning together for quite some time. These competence centers, the idea would be that we'll have 1 per member state. They will be becoming somehow like the stop shop for providing on-demand services to public and private users. Access to tools, access to equipment, and in particular access, of course, to supercomputing so that they can offer the kind of services, in particular innovation services, that many of our industries need. I see that the problem is recurrent and it's continuing. Doesn't matter. So let me come back also to some of the other calls, and we will continue the successful experience that we started with the Fortissimo, and we will have another call that it will be addressing SMEs, engineering SMEs and manufacturing SMEs. The 2020 calls are still under elaboration, so it's very early to announce them, but basically their objective will be continuing the efforts we started under the European Processor Initiative, and from there on building the first pilot systems for moving to the exascale, so that we are ready later on to build a full-scale exascale machine. So this is what is now the second major part of what the joint undertaking will be doing, and we will hope to have your full support to making it also happen. Now, let me move to something which may not be so essential for you, but it is essential for functioning and for making the whole thing coordinated well. This is the governance aspects. So first of all the decision-making bodies are articulated around the governing board. All the decision-making is done by the European Union, and by the 28 participating members. We will have the JU hopefully becoming autonomous in the second part of 2019, and in the next very few days, my information is that in the next 2-3 days, we will publish the call for selecting the executive director. So for those of you who are interested, that would be a very good opportunity to play it European. So more than what you are actually doing it, and even, you know, making it happen from internal. Then next to it, we need advisory bodies that are, advisory bodies somehow that are advising the governing board on all the essential elements of the joint undertaking. Which are those? Of course, the research and innovation agenda, where we have our private partners participating and preparing the roadmap, so the ETP4HPC, but also the Big Data Value Association. So this is the RIAG. And then we have the infrastructure advisory group advising us on infrastructure aspects, pre-exascale and petascale, what kinds of applications, and later on, what kind of infrastructure we're going to build in the next round. Now, all this is good, but of course it's not enough, because in particular the advisory groups, but also the governing board would need first of all to act on behalf of you and with you. So our ambition is then to make sure that all the intelligence gathering we need to be able to feed in the process of the EuroHPC would be coming basically for you. And we have on the one side the technology supply chain, and on the other side the user chain, of course. And when I say users, it's all kinds of users, from public and scientific users to the private users, including, of course, our basic partners here, which are Géant and Prace. So, and I think one of the challenges that we'll have in the next coming months, and this is what I asked to the infrastructure advisory group to make sure that it happens, is to make sure that from the user perspective at least, because I think from the technology perspective it's already happening via the ETP4HPC and BDVA, but from the user perspective, that we put in place a sort of structure to be able to have very added value interactions between all the users, and in particular here the industrial users, where the scientific users are quite well organized under Prace, but this is not necessarily the case for the industrial users. So to make sure that we put in place a structure that would allow a very good interaction between what's happening on the left side and what's happening on the governing side. And of course, the result of all that would be the implementation itself, which would be reflected in terms of machines we will be acquiring. I've already explained that in terms of the research and innovation projects we will be launching, but also what Prace and Géant will be doing in the next months, if it is not in the next years. So you can say all this is fine and it's going to happen in the next 2 years, but this is not the end of the process. It's just the beginning. Because if we put up such a kind of infrastructure, a structure like this, like the EuroHPC Joint Undertaking, it was not just to have it run for 2 years and then, you know, have the machines and have them running and operational until some time, until they become void. We did it to be able to do it for the next 10, 15 years. That's the ambition that we want to do. And why do we believe that this is good to have? Not only for the reasons and the motivations I've already mentioned to you, but in particular because HPC there is to stay, from the point of view that it's one of the key critical technologies from the point of view of feeding the digital transformation of Europe. Because this is what is at stake. And all of you are addressing industrial aspects, and all of you are addressing scientific challenges, but which are closely related to socioeconomic challenges that Europe is facing. Climate change, personalized medicine, understanding how we build a new generation of materials. So all this has HPC at the center. And I don't need to convince you, you're already convinced. So, and I think this is good that you managed also to convince the policymakers to be able to make it happen and now to continue it for the next 10 years. Because this is the discussion we are now just starting about what could be EuroHPC in the next round. Our ambition would be to continue with the pillars you see there, so the infrastructure aspects, build the exascale machines, the post-exascale machines, prepare for the advent of new computing architectures, neuromorphic-based, AI chip-based, because AI and HPC go very closely together. I don't need to convince you on that. But of course also the advent of quantum computing later on, and make sure that the first realizations of hybrid computing would be in Europe, maybe towards the end of the next financial framework around 2026, 2027, even with small quantum computers that we may have, and we certainly will have by that time. And at the end, what we want to build is exactly the same, is the leadership in the supply and use of these technologies. So we're not building infrastructure for building infrastructure, we're building an infrastructure that is co-designed together with all of you from a user perspective, because that's the challenge that we are all facing here. Now, how are we going to make it happen? What we have foreseen, and I need your help onto this, is we have foreseen to use 3 different programs that come under the next EU budgetary framework. So far, I was mentioning to you that we have a budget of 1 billion for the 2 years, 2019 and 2020, from the public side to be able to realize the first instances of infrastructure and ecosystem. But now, the game that is coming is much bigger, is of the order of multi-billion. So, Horizon Europe, first of all. This is the new framework program. I'm pretty sure that many of you are part of the discussions. You know that we are actively preparing now the framework program, and that we will soon launch strategic planning for what would be the research priorities. I do count on all of you to be part of the consultation that will be starting out there as of June. So this is one good activity for you, and I'm pretty sure that you would have to be part of it, and I'm pretty sure you will reply to that. How much money are we going to have for research on HPC? How much money are we going to have for pilot applications that would use the extreme computing capabilities we will have? I don't know yet. So the more noise you make, the more money we'll get. This is for sure. And if the target here is 1 billion euro, because this is what more or less we have planned for this kind of activity under the cluster digital industry and space, in order to get it, we will need your help. Second big program. Horizon Europe is for research and innovation. If you want to have a real industrial policy, and in particular if you want to expand your capabilities all over Europe, this is the Digital Europe program. That's the big difference. On the one side, we do research and innovation. On the other side, we build the capabilities we need so that all member states, all of you can profit from. What are these capabilities that we want to build? So the machines, the next generation machines, I've already elaborated on that. We need to build applications at large scale, not only the pilot applications that we have under the research and innovation program. We need to continue the efforts and build now competence centers and provide them, the effect that we need in terms of networking, in terms of building it from a national perspective, so that it becomes a major player in the whole landscape. And definitely, there will be a part here under the Digital Europe program that will be addressing explicitly training and skills. So you heard Thomas Lippert saying that under Prace we have already a number of those, and our ambition is to use part of that budget on training and skills and to use it for HPC. So what is the envelope here that we have foreseen? 2.7 billion euros from the union funds, just on that pillar, HPC, and another 200 to 300 million on training and skills. So it's 3 billion here. And you would expect, to a very large extent, that we'll have also national contributions, because this is only the union contribution. So this is why it's also absolutely important and fundamental, and I'm really turning back to you, to support the Digital Europe program in the negotiations that are coming. So we need these budgets to be able to do our ambitions, to realize our ambitions in the next years. And finally, equally extremely important, is that we want to build a networked infrastructure that can be accessible from all over Europe. And for this, we have a third program, which is called Connecting Europe Facility, and where we've already asked Jean and Prace to sit down together and to do some planning, so as to be able to provide a backbone network of the order of, I would say, some tens of giga, up to 1 terabyte, and be able to connect the JU machines, but also the other national machines. And the first estimations that for being able to deploying these kinds of dedicated backbone is of the order of 300 to 350 million euros. So I'm pretty sure that Eric Huizer will elaborate further on that when the moment will come, just after me. Now, I talked about the federated infrastructure, and I would like to conclude with that. So you may say, what is the federation here that we are aiming at? So since Prace is already providing quite a lot, actually the idea here is to be able to continue the work of Prace, build further on that work, convince the member states that they will continue financing national machines, but also European machines under the JU, and possibly devote some of those computing power to Prace, to Europe. And the idea would be to federate these resources at European level and develop a sort of cloud-based service provisioning platform for dynamic services like the ones, for example, that Thomas Lippert was mentioning in his presentation. So this is the federation we are looking for. On the one side, interconnecting these machines in the way I mentioned, and on the other side, to be able to provide this kind of service provisioning platform to be able to serve all of you through a cloud-based and, if possible, the most secure possible based infrastructure provisioning platform. This is so the ambition, part of all our objectives for the next round. And with this, I would like to thank all of you for being here and supporting our objectives for the next round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. We would have time for a couple of questions. Wait for the microphone, please. If you can kindly bring the microphone over.
Thank you for the talk. I would like to know, from the user point of view, what are the requirements to participate in this phase of precursion to exascale computing? I guess that there will be a preparatory call, or does it already happen, or how can the users participate in this phase?
In principle, the hosting consortia, before they submit their proposals, have submitted proposals that I'm pretty sure that they have already interacted with their national users to make sure that the types of systems that they want to build are corresponding to user requirements. So I take it for granted, at least when you see in the proposals what they are proposing, for sure they are targeting a number of applications in different areas that are corresponding to what many of you are already doing. So I would say, let's first take the step of deciding and selecting what the hosting entities are, and then we'll have time a little bit to see how to make sure that if we have more than one machine, we make sure that we have computing architectures that are corresponding to different user requirements, at least from the European perspective, and that these are matched also to the national requirements. How we'll do it, I will come back on this after the 5th of June, once I know what exactly the number of machines would be, who will be the winners, and discussing with them how to put in place a sort of structured approach so that we can continue in the next steps without losing too much time, but also focusing exactly on what you said, is providing machines that are not only in the top 3. I have in mind very often what the Chinese are doing here, and make sure that what we do corresponds to what we need.
Another question?
Hi. On your last slide, you have the federation layer, so of these HPC centers. So this federation layer looks very much like European Open Science Cloud, maybe. Could you clarify a little bit the relationship? Could you clarify between those two, please?
Can we go back to the last slide? Well, I will start elaborating while waiting for the slide to come. You're absolutely right. From the point of view that It's a service provisioning platform that we have in mind, which is based on Phoenix, for those who know about Phoenix. It's a project we are already financing. At the same time, we are already financing a service provisioning platform in the Science Cloud. So we have a big consortium with the name of EOSC Hub. And at some stage, it makes, it's absolutely fundamental to make the connections between the two. The ambition would be the Science Cloud will offer also computing services. And the Science Cloud will offer computing services both in the sense of high-performance computing, that is in the way Prace is providing them today, but also in terms of, I would say, throughput computing by using the kind of distributed computing we have around Europe right now. So it goes without saying that the interconnection between the two would be necessary to do, but as far as the HPC services are concerned, these need to be provided by this platform, not by another one. So that is where we need to work now closely together when we have some sort of solid, I would say, experiments out there to be able to make the interconnectivity and see how exactly we provide the general scientific communities from a cloud perspective also with this kind of HPC services. You can have many entry points, it doesn't matter, but what does matter is that these things are extremely visible at all levels.
Thank you. Let us thank Thomas again. Next we have another keynote by Erik Höyser, who is the Chief Executive Officer of GEANT. Erik, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to talk a little bit about GEANT and how we want to contribute to the EuroHPC program. And as I don't know where you all are in understanding what GEANT is, we are an organization that supports European projects on the networking side. We provide access to a portfolio of services and infrastructure resources. We operate a European network between national research and education networks. We manage a whole portfolio of services and education side, not only the research side, and we organize a lot of community events, the biggest of which is our conference, which always is in June, called TNC. And now we have to wait until it gets back. What I want to say next is GEANT is an association, consists of 40 members, national research and education networks from all over Europe. And we cover 40 countries in Europe, which is bigger than the EU, and which of course is a nice basis to, if you look at the EuroHPC countries, because all of those countries are served by GEANT and the National Research and Education Networks. If we look at what Thomas just presented, I summarized it in a different way because I always have trouble understanding how things work, so we all have to find out, I have to find out how I would write it down. So what I see is the European Cloud Initiative and two major initiatives below there that are the European Open Science Cloud and the European Data Infrastructure. And under the European Data Infrastructure you have EuroHPC, the Joint Undertaking, and I also see there GEANT and Prace to provide the e-infrastructure that is necessary to run both EDI and EOSC. The European data infrastructure, in my view, underpins the European Open Science Cloud. Without EDI, it would be really difficult, let me rephrase that, it would be really difficult to realize the European Open Science Cloud. And we all, I always like to say, we all have a very clear picture of what the European Open Science Cloud is. The problem is, of course, none of us has the same picture. The role of GEA and Prace, in my view, therefore, is to make sure that we underpin EOSC in a very consistent way, and we offer the services that are necessary for researchers to make their data openly available and to work with that data in compute, storage, etc. So you'll recognize this slide. I think it's the third time already it's on the screen today. And if you look at that, this is where GEA and Prace, in my view, are positioned, and that's where we're working together to make sure that that part is operated as smoothly as possible. If we look at the GEA services, GEA has a portfolio of services, and I think two of them are particularly valuable and necessary for the EuroHPC side, and that is the network services and the trust and identity services. If we look at the network services, this is our current network in Europe, and if you look at what we are currently doing with help of the European Commission, we're currently already extending this network and upgrading this network to include a way more fiber infrastructure in there. What you see here is that the black lines is probably going to be fiber, and the red lines is also fiber, but is shared spectrum, which we share with other national research and education infrastructures that are members of us. Some of you might notice that the Scandinavian region seems underserved, but that's because that's not served by GEA, but that's served by Nordinet. And Nordinet at this point in time is also building out a new network that will seamlessly integrate with GEA. So it will assure that we together are covering the whole of Europe, and we'll be able to serve all the users that we need to serve. And by the way, for GEA, we aim at serving 50 million users, not just 12,000 users. However, because we own the fiber, we own the spectrum, it is easier for us to start building what Thomas just indicated, is a dedicated network for connecting the pre-exascale and the petascale machines, and finally, of course, exascale machines. And as we have the fibers, our investment will mostly be in equipment to make sure that we can get the speeds that are necessary, that are required by the users. And of course, we need to invest also in the national infrastructures, because this is just connecting the countries, but within the countries, a lot of investment needs to be done, of course, to make sure that we can serve the needs that are required by EuroHPC. One of the things we are facing is that while most of you are trying to up the amount of petaflops, at the same time our users are trying to up the amount of petabytes that we transport, and we have by now already reached the exascale in networking early 2019. The data growth is phenomenal, and there's no slowing down of it. It keeps on growing and growing. Now, some of you might wonder, why do we need a specific dedicated infrastructure for research and education? Why can't we just use commercial networks for this? I'll try and explain that to you. First, look at the pattern. The upper pattern is of an average commercial provider, and you see a very strong daily pattern with a weekend pattern in there, and ups and downs in that. The bottom one is what you can see if you look at a national research and education network. You see that the traffic pattern is totally different. If you look at the scales, you also see that the amount that is transported continuously, and the bottom one is of the order of magnitude of 70 to 80 gigabits, and that is almost continuous. So that's the first difference. It's a totally different traffic pattern. So what we did a couple of years ago, in 2017, is from CERN, we took 3 connections, 2 commercial ones, each of them 10 gigabit connections, and one based on GA and the NRANs, also 10 gigabit. And we transported a continuous stream to make sure that we had ample time to fill any buffers, and we measured what the throughput was all the way to Canberra in Australia. Now, on the first commercial provider, we got an average of roughly 1 gigabit per second. So that's roughly 10% of what you paid for. They make you pay for 10 gig, you only get 1 gigabit per second on average. The second one was even worse. It averaged out at 0.1 gigabits per second. So you get roughly 1/100 of what you are paying for. Then we did the same with the research networks, and then you got 9.8, which is pretty close to the 10 that you're paying for. So this is another indication of why we need research network. Researchers are not standard users. They want to ship large data sets, and these continue for an enormous amount of time, and they want consistent network behavior during that time. So if you compare this in file, if you would ship a 100 terabyte file over the research networks, it would have taken 1.4 days, and over the other one it would have taken roughly 8 days or 120 days to ship the file. By now, of course, the GA and NRAN infrastructure has been upgraded already to 100 gigabits, so we're 10 times as fast. So shipping a 100 terabit file would now cost you in the order of magnitude of 2 hours to 3 hours. So you see, this is why I think our networks are necessary. But it's not just our networks that we're looking at. The users have a lot of other headaches. And one of them is, of course, security. And with security comes that the users have to remember lots and lots of passwords for every service they are willing to access. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have the system administrators that really want good passwords, passwords that you can't remember, passwords that are difficult to remember, because if you can't remember them, it's more difficult for a hacker to find it. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we solve that problem by introducing EduGain. EduGain is a federated identity infrastructure that we developed over the years, over all the national research and education networks in the world, where the user can use the credentials from his home institute to log in to any service of the participating countries. And as you can see, we have all the yellow countries here are participating already. I think we have numbers there. That's about 60 federations that are active currently. There's 10 more candidate federations, that's the blue ones. And with all that, we can use that for providing access also to HPC services in a secure and safe way, without the user having to remember multiple unrememberable passwords. With this trust and identity infrastructure that we developed, we included Prace in some of the discussions. A year ago, Prace also signed the Trust and Identity Framework from WISE for secure collaborations, which is a fundament we can build on for EuroHPC. Within the European ARC project, we developed a blueprint for an architecture on trust and identity, how we could connect the services and the identity service. We should be starting using that also in the Prace community. And I'm offering here to help every one of you from Géant to pilot this. And to that end, to make it even easier, we developed identity as a service. If your home institute doesn't run an identity service, we can help you out. We have developed edu teams, which allows you to quickly build a trust and identity infrastructure to collaborate, identify and connect over virtual organizations that are spread all over the world. And that makes it really easy to create collaborations also in the EuroHPC space. So, to summarize what I've tried to tell you is that from the user to the compute, I think everything in between, not just the network, but also the security and the trusted access and the identity, that is what we as Géant aim to deliver. A lot of that is already in place, a lot of that will need to be developed as we go along and develop EuroHPC, because the demands will be higher, the quality needs to be higher, and therefore we still need to further develop these services, all of them, to meet those demands. And then we'll be able to deliver a secure access from the user to that compute service. So final thoughts. I think e-infrastructures really need to work together to create that seamless experience for researchers and students. And we need to do that in a secure environment, of course, and in a cost-effective way to make sure that everyone has cost-effective access to the compute and other resources. Géant and the Endurance are used to working together. There's no way a network can be solistic and not cooperate. So we, by nature, always cooperate and work together, not just in Europe, but we work together all over the globe to create a seamless experience for users on research networks. And we have discovered that sharing our resources amongst each other makes us stronger and not weaker. And I think that needs to be extended into other e-infrastructures as well. Géant will, of course, continue to work with Prace. We have a really good relationship, at least from my perspective, and with EuroHPC, and hopefully together we will serve the needs of researchers in Europe, not only now, but also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. We will have time for questions. Florian. Third row on the left.
So thank you, Eric, for your talk, and I second also from the Prace perspective. We have a very good view on the collaboration between Prace and Géant. And in addition, Géant is an integral partner in the current Prace 6IP project. So we are also looking forward to even closer collaboration and working on the topics you mentioned.
Thank you, Florian. Appreciate it.
Another question?
It's very interesting. I discovered something. From the user's point of view, and from you said that this data, volume of data increasing very rapidly, and it will be on also the trend for the coming years. What is the perspective for you? You rely on the existing technology, or you just imagine that it should be something new, like HPC is doing something new processes, for example, it will be new technology for transfer data, or it's okay already for you?
Well, it's not okay. We always need to improve, and I see there's several ways forward. First of all, we will do what we call DevOps. So that is just increasing what we, based on what we know, develop new stuff, move from 100 gigabit to 1 terabit, but essentially using the same technology, just everybody knows how we can get faster with the new processors, so we will use the new processors in our equipment to make sure that we reach the 1 terabit speeds. And then you have a couple of choices. For example, if we want a dedicated network, and we're still debating that for EuroHPC, do we really need a fixed dedicated network, or can we use some form of orchestration software which redefines the network at the moment that you need it for EuroHPC users? Well, we will be looking at both sides of that. So we will be looking at, or we are already looking at orchestration software, whether we can use that, whether it's safe enough, whether it's secure enough, whether it meets the operational needs, or whether we just throw bandwidth at the problem, which is the other solution.
One final question, please.
Thank you. Thomas earlier said that future HPC systems of Europe will likely also be the AI systems of Europe. What impact do you expect on the network?
Yeah, well, I really don't know. If orchestration gets successful, I expect that AI will also play a role in orchestration, so that we have some form of intelligence that is monitoring the network like currently my people are doing. They're monitoring the network, and if they see something, they'll, they switch something by. They make sure that the network continues running. And maybe in somewhere in the future, I can do with less operators because we can replace them with artificial intelligence. We're a long way away from that. Most of the errors that my operators fix require some human intervention anyway, and are so unexpected that they're not very predictable. And I might be not enthusiastic enough about artificial intelligence, but I don't think it's up to the level yet that it could replace those. But it's certainly something we will be looking at, if only because if we write AI and blockchaining proposals, they stand a much better chance of getting money.
Thank you. Let's thank Eric again. Next we have the group photo in the stairs, down from this floor to the ground floor. After the group photo there is the coffee break, and the next plenary session starts here at 11 o'clock sharp. We have several members of the staff whom you recognize from the dark colored uniform and text staff, so they are here to guide and help you. With this, I would like to close the morning session, and let's thank all the speakers for their excellent talks again.